Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's truly a pleasure to welcome you all to this first session of the monthly UN-LEA webinar series. The UN has been supporting member states for decades to strengthen the legal identity ecosystem, to ensure that everyone has the right to be recognized as a person before the law and is able to access public and private services. Unfortunately, however, there are still hundreds of millions of people without legal identity. Based on the World Bank's estimation, around 10% of the world's population does not have any form of identity credentials, either because they're not registered or they did not receive any certificates or documentation to prove who they are. So in order to address this challenge, the UN Legal Identity Agenda Task Force was established in September 2018 at the request of the UN Secretary General and with the support of the Deputy Secretary General. It has two aims: to take a unified approach to legal identity across the UN and strengthen collaboration with the World Bank. And secondly, to support member states accelerate progress to achieve SDG 16.9, which is legal identity for all, and SDG 17.9.2b, which is achieve 100% birth registration and 80% death registration. We have seen in recent years, from the COVID-19 pandemic, the war in Ukraine and beyond, and the many crises that are now accumulating into what many are calling polycrisis, that these aggravate the socioeconomic inequalities across the world. And they remind us of the importance of legal identity for people, and mostly those who are most vulnerable and excluded, to ensure that they are fully recognized, they can claim their rights, and they can access services. So as part of our efforts to accelerate the implementation of Agenda 2030, we must make further progress on legal identity. This is why this webinar is important, not only to share experiences, but also to strengthen a community of practice that will further advocate and raise attention on this issue. And I'll just add a personal note here. I'm particularly pleased to see that this webinar series is coming together. As Risa mentioned, I've been co-chairing on behalf of UNDP, the task force, since 2019. And it is an issue which I see as fundamental to our governance work and our sustainable development work. And we really need to be accelerating our efforts in this area. But since the establishment of the task force, more than 15 UN agencies and departments have worked together at the global, regional, and country level. At the global level, the task force has produced a number of guidelines and normative frameworks in order to develop a robust legal identity ecosystem based on a human rights approach, which will help close the global identity gap. At the regional level, the regional economic commissions have been galvanizing political will from member states to work on legal identity issues. And at the country level, the task force has directly supported 8 countries by providing technical and financial assistance. And we are also documenting various lessons learned from past projects. So through this webinar series, the task force would like to help translate some of the policy framework into programming at the country level. And we'd like to learn from the great initiatives in different countries and share good practice among relevant colleagues in UNCTs. So in this first webinar, we'd like to provide an overview of the task force and then highlight some of the critical aspects of the UN-LEA approach, which are firstly, the importance of a one UN approach, secondly, the importance of integration of CRVS and national ID systems, and thirdly, aspects of our partnership with partners such as the World Bank or regional banks. As a co-chair of the task force, I cannot highlight enough the importance and benefit the one UN approach brings to all our work. The countries that the task force has supported have unanimously agreed that this way of support provides a comprehensive and seamless assistance to our member states. And we're going to hear more about that on the good practices on coordination from the colleagues from Mozambique who are online. In relation to the integration of CRVS and national ID, we recently see many countries where there have been 2 different foundational registries of citizens developing new national ID schemes without linking it to civil registry. This could cause problems later on in public service delivery and then retroactive steps needed to integrate to the 2 systems. Azerbaijan can provide some good lessons learned and success stories on this aspect from their experiences. And the final set of colleagues we will hear from is from Honduras, who had a really important and significant partnership with different partners, including the Inter-American Regional Bank. And Alessandra will be able to highlight how the CT was able to align its project with UN-LEA and engage with external partners. So let me end these brief remarks by highlighting again that legal identity is a priority for UNDP. It's a fundamental right that we are addressing also through our new global governance program, Governance for People and Planet, and having it at the core of our work stream on governance for public goods and services. And I hand it back to Risa now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for the comprehensive overview of the webinar and then your commitments on this matter. This is absolutely amazing. So now I'm giving floor to my colleagues of UN-LEA Secretariat colleagues, Predrag from UNDESA and Pascal from UNICEF, to give a brief overview of UN legal identity agenda and the role of the task force. So Predrag and Pascal, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Risa. Good morning from New York. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Predrag Savic, and I'm from DESA UNSD Statistics Division. I'm the focal point for CRVS work of DESA, and we are one of the co-chairs of the UN-LEA Secretariat. I'm together with my colleague Bhaskar, who I think has some issues with his video. We're going to just briefly give you an overview of this initiative, a bit of a background of it, the rationale for it, and most importantly, focus on the implementation in countries, where you will also hear participants today talking about it. I don't have to explain much to this crowd on the importance of this topic. Everyone has a right to be recognized as a person under the law. It is in Article 6 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It is in several human rights instruments. Without it, there are numerous challenges one faces: lack of public services, inability to exercise political rights, increased risk of exploitation, vulnerabilities, and so on. Of course, this topic is highly visible in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Sarah has already mentioned we have specific targets, 16.9 calling for legal identity for all, including birth registration, and we also have target 17.19 calling for 100% completeness of birth registration and at least 80% when it comes to death registration. Needless to say that achievement of these two targets are catalytic for more than 10 other sustainable development goals. And just the data from civil registration is necessary for at least 60 other SDG targets and indicators. And of course, countries have committed to achieving this goal by 2030, and as we all know, there is not much time left on this. With this said, up to 2018, Sarah has also mentioned, different UN entities were working in silos on this topic. So, for example, DESA was working on normative frameworks on CRVS and legal identity. UNICEF has a strong focus on child protection, IOM on cross-border mobility, and so on. But then in 2018 came this request from the Secretary General to promote a more coherent approach to legal identity across the UN, to work with the World Bank Group on this topic, to build on existing global, regional, country efforts, to have one UN voice when it comes to this topic, especially on strategic advocacy, on communication, and to be able to enable joint UN support for implementation of legal identity agenda, with the overall goal to close the global identity gap by 2030. The UN entities have responded to this request, and that's how the UN Legal Identity Task Force was born. The task force is a way to operationalize this approach, and it's structured of 14 different UN agencies and 2 regional economic commissions, and it's co-chaired by the Secretariat, which is a tripartite body composed of UNICEF, UNDP, and DESA. Members of the task force include various UN agencies that you can see now on your screen, IOM, OCHA, OHCHR, UNICEF, UNDP, of course, UN Women, WHO, Especially important are regional economic commissions for Africa and Asia, in Africa and Asia Pacific, where those legal identity gaps are the widest. We also have UN Global Pulse. The task force itself works through an annual work plan, which is agreed upon every year at the beginning of the year, normally in February, and then it meets every 2 months. The Secretariat of UNICEF, UNDP, and DESA, which is on a technical level, me, Bhaskar, and Risa, meet every week. Some of the objectives of the task force are to oversee the implementation of legal identity agenda at the regional and national level, where we engage with regional commissions on this, to develop and maintain normative work related to this topic, and that's especially my job as a focal point in DESA on this topic. Also to engage in fundraising, advocacy, communication on joint events at the margins of General Assembly, on Statistical Commission, and so on, to brief DSGs and other principals on the latest developments on this implementation, and to support UNCTs to implement this agenda. I mentioned 2030 agenda, but I should also stress that legal identity is also in UNSG's Our Common Agenda, where legal identity is one of the proposals as a follow-up of the agenda. One of the very first successes of this group was to define legal identity, to define it as the basic characteristics of an individual's identity, which is conferred through registration by authorized civil registration authority. In absence of birth registration, that can be done by legally recognized identification authority, which is then linked to a CR system. Coming from statistics division, this is especially important for the production of vital statistics, and then also in conjunction with the identity management. The UN, what is the legal identity agenda itself? It is an approach, it is a holistic approach. And when we say holistic, we mean from birth to death. It is started at birth and it is retired at person's death. It is a holistic approach to civil registration of all vital events, to production of vital statistics that I mentioned, to establishment of population registers and identity management apparatus from birth to death. And there should be full interoperability in simultaneous manner between these three functions. When we say full interoperability, we mean using the same set of classifications, same set of methodologies, and same set of definitions, which of course should be in line with international standards, recommendations, and in full compliance with human rights of all people concerned, including the right to privacy. Sort of schematic visual representation of what I just mentioned is in the next slide, when we have civil registration, vital statistics, and ID management combined. And I will, at this point, hand over to my colleague Bhaskar from UNICEF to continue with this presentation.
So thanks, Frederick, for a very comprehensive presentation. Colleagues, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Bhaskar Mishra, and I work with UNICEF headquarters. So this slide depicts a holistic approach to civil registration, vital statistics, and identity management, as Frederick said, and this is the recommendation coming from the United Nations. You will see a lot of boxes. Let me simplify it for you. The boxes outside the red circle describe the CRBS process. So that is how different vital events are reported to civil registration authorities for registration and certification, and by whom. They also talk about the principles civil registration authorities follow while converting notifications and declarations into registration and certifications, and how vital statistics are generated as an outcome of this process, and how these vital statistics complement other sources of vital statistics, such as population censuses and surveys. As you know, civil registration is the best source for vital statistics, as highlighted by Frederick, as it can provide data on critical fertility indicators, starting from crude birth rate to total fertility rate, and mortality indicators starting from crude death rate to age-specific death rates, and maternal mortality rates and ratios at all administrative levels and at much shorter intervals which is not possible from any other source, such as surveys and population censuses. By pulling civil registration data on births, deaths, marriages, divorces, and migration, a population register can be established, which serves as the base, and a unique ID can be allotted at this stage to follow a life cycle approach from birth to death. The population registers feed into national ID systems in the most cost-effective manner and in real time, and through them with other functional registries like voter lists. The population register can also interact directly with other functional registers through a data access protocol. You can see such a linkage within the red circle. Please note that integration between CR and ID can take place with or without a population register. However, having a population register has so many advantages, including laying the base of a register-based census in the long run. The ultimate goal is to put civil registration at the core of the ID ecosystem of a country. So the official launch of the UNLIA took place at the 5th Conference of African Ministers responsible for civil registration in Lusaka, Zambia in 2019. And 13 countries agreed to implement the UNLIA approach, and they are called pilot countries. We started with Africa because it has the maximum burden of unregistered children and populations without a legal identity. A rapid country assessment was conducted to understand the current situation and align the existing systems with the UNLIA recommended approach. UNECA has led rapid assessment missions to a few more countries in Africa. Countries in other continents such as Cambodia, Vietnam, Chile, and several more follow the UNLIA recommended approach. The second ministerial conference in Asia and the Pacific made an explicit recommendation for adopting the UNLIA approach, and the same was reiterated in the recently concluded export segment of the 6th ministerial conference in Africa. The UNLIA task force also supports by formulating the normative framework, including implementation guidelines. A UN country team guideline was developed to operationalize UNLIA on the ground. We also develop communication and advocacy materials and tools and organize knowledge sharing sessions. In 2022, we organized a UNGA event on implementing the UNLIA in Cameroon and Cambodia. Side events are also organized at other critical platforms such as the UN Statistical Commission and ministerial conferences. We also utilize global events such as the 3rd Global CRVS and Gender Conference to create awareness of the UNLIA approach. And the UNLIA approach complements other continental initiatives in Africa, Asia, and the Pacific, such as API CRVS, Getting Everyone in the Picture, No Name Campaign, and ID for Africa. So besides the 13 pilot countries, the country-level implementation has expanded to a few more countries in Africa and Asia. We also have multi-year funding arrangements through Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, and Japan for a couple of countries. Some of these funding are about to expire, and we're in the process of looking for extra funding. The task force produces critical documents, including methodology development and studies in critical areas such as data privacy, innovation, and biometrics. A few important pieces of work, such as developing the UNLIA costed strategic plan, CRBS ID case studies to promote South-South learning, synergies between CRBS and social protection, and cost of inaction in CRBS are at advanced stages of finalization. Okay. So what we want to do, our ultimate aim is to implement UNLIA in Africa, Asia, the Pacific, Latin America, the Caribbean, and other regions, aligning CRBS and ID systems in countries as per the UNLIA recommended approach. In all countries, the ultimate goal is to have universal registration of vital events, generate vital statistics, and establish legal identity from birth to death. However, we do face some serious challenges. Due to funding constraints, we cannot operate at full scale, affecting our capacity to produce critical normative and implementation pieces. This also affects our capacity to engage with other partners. As we advance, we want to focus on these 3 areas. Countries in humanitarian settings face additional sets of challenges that go beyond the traditional lens of CRBS and therefore require special measures and improvisations to meet their responsibilities. Humanitarian context and protracted emergencies, including armed conflicts, natural disasters, mass cross-border or internal displacement, and public health emergencies put the child's right to identity at heightened risk. Such situations may leave children without a birth certificate and therefore unable to prove their identity, and in turn unable to access services and enjoy their rights. They are also at great risk of becoming stateless because they are unable to establish their nationality. So central to these efforts is the availability, accessibility, and affordability of civil registration services, including in emergency and humanitarian settings. The more developed civil registration systems are in non-humanitarian context, the more resilient and prepared they will be to withstand humanitarian situations. The involvement of CSOs in the overall process is essential to bring in an independent perspective, especially to protect and preserve the human rights aspect of legal identity. We have been discussing how best to engage with CSOs for some time. Starting this year, the UNLEA task force will organize 2 discussion sessions with CSOs every year. We are still working on the logistics and will announce the dates in due course. Inherent to a child's right to an identity is also the right to a name, nationality, and family relations, all fundamental features of a child's identity. The facts contained in the birth certificates are used to determine which nationality rules apply, which is often linked to the child's family relations. Children also have the right to preserve their identity and to have their identity reestablished in a speedy manner if illegally deprived of some or all elements of their identity. This is in line with CRC Article 8, yet millions of children remain stateless and do not know their family relations and origins. The UNLEA task force is working on a set of guidelines for the age-appropriate, need-based, and safe use of biometrics. The key is to use biometrics when, how, and why. All aspects, including evidence, logistics of implementation, risks of exclusion, and risks associated with data protection, privacy, confidentiality, ethics, and data misuse are being looked into. Moving forward, we will continue to engage with member states to accelerate the progress. As Sarah pointed out in her speech, still there are 850 million people, including more than 200 million children under 5 without a legal identity. The key is to establish a health civil registration national ID pathway. It has 2 advantages: collect information once and use multiple times, and move information, not people. We will explore all opportunities to improve inclusivity to leave no one behind, and UN-City coordination acquires the most critical role in bringing one UN approach. The recent evaluation of UNDP's legal identity work clearly establishes the importance of a well-functioning UN-City. Thank you very much. Over to you, Risa.
Thank you so much, Frederick and Bhaskar. Just before moving to the country cases, I just wanted to emphasize one thing. We said that there are 3 regions that we prioritize: Africa, Asia Pacific, and Latin America and Caribbean. But it doesn't mean that we do not provide support. We in fact do provide support globally. So for the colleagues from other regions, please be rest assured, our support is available to all the global regions. So just wanted to mention that. So thank you again, Frederick and Bhaskar, so much. And as they said, the most critical part of UN legal identity agenda lies in the country work. So now I would like to hear from 3 different country examples. As Sarah said, we have Mozambique, Azerbaijan, and Honduras today. And the first presentation is by Mozambique colleagues, which is one of the UNLEA task force supported countries. And they have been doing amazing work on coordination of UNCTs and also made some good progress to link CRVS and national ID system. Andres and Veronica, over to you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, afternoon, and good evening, colleagues. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share the learnings and experience from Mozambique. My name is Veronica Vati, Child Protection Manager, UNICEF Mozambique. I will be co-presenting with my colleague Andres from UNDP, but we have also other colleagues from the UN agencies, part of the UNTT online, including our CEO office. So here I described really the key steps, the key milestones that really led to this experience in Mozambique towards the LEA. We started, with the interministerial group chaired and co-led by UNICEF and also the government in really bringing forward at the national level the CRVS. The first step was the CRVS operational plan, which was then revised and is still also about to be finalized until 2028. This is really to coordinate all actions at the national level. Then we had the President initiative, whereby really this Movimento de Identidade para Todos really identified the civil registration at the national level, one of the flagship of the government, and it is really the government sitting on the driving seat of this flagship. Then we had the United Nations Task Group platform coordination with all UN agencies, including also the World Bank. The UNDP has been quite active towards 2020, 2021, where we conceptualized, we developed, we crafted the UNLEA implementation plan, which is really, the one vision, the one UN. And then ultimately, the UNLEA implementation plan was then endorsed by the UNCT last year in 2022. And then ultimately, the UNLEA is now the flagship of the United Nations Development Framework, one of the key strategic priority of SP4, part of the peace, governance, and human rights. Next. So just to give you a bit of a context, the overview of the situation, as you may see, birth registration coverage under the age of 5 has reached 49%, still a bit low, because this still means that there are a lot of children under the age of 5 which are not registered. Birth also registration under the age of 1 is also low, though there is not so much difference between boys and girls. It still remains at 33% and 32%. We have also death registration coverage at 12.1. The interoperability with the health facility, we made some progress. Out of the 260 eligible health facilities in the country, we managed, to establish the registration posters, so areas where we can register in 143 hospitals. And then the total voters registered still is at 13 million for the previous electoral cycle. Next slide, please. We mentioned the UNLEA implementation plan, why it has been so important also for Mozambique. Really, this sets the tone, right, for the country, for the government, and also for the United Nations as a platform to give some strategic directions. It is really the conceptualization of one UN program for the LEA in Mozambique, positions really strategically the UN as an operational entity and as an integrated solution for the LEA in the country, but also builds on the UN comparative advantage. So each agency has a lead in one specific result area, and there is complementarity of synergies and efforts in that. And then also maintains a high level of UN profile in the LEA landscape. Also, when we were crafting, this implementation plan, and also in the discussion at the UNCT level, it came really much to the forefront the importance of having one vision, one common approach, also vis-a-vis the bilateral and the development partners, that we really see the engagement of the UN in realizing the President Initiative, and having an integrated national civil registry at the country level. And then again, being now as one of the strategic priority for the UNCT, this will really set the tone for further strategic engagement with the World Bank, with the government, and other bilateral agencies. Over to you, Andres, and next, thank you.
Thank you very much, Veronica. Thank you very much, colleagues. As was mentioned by Veronica, my name is Andres del Castillo. I am the Chief Technical Advisor for the Democracy and Elections Project in Mozambique and co-chair of the UN Task Force on Legal Identity in Mozambique, together with Veronica from UNICEF. So our next slide is more or less focused on what's the idea that we've been developing the UNLEA implementation plan in Mozambique, particularly what are the areas that are being covered by the UNLEA implementation plan that has been developed by the UN agencies under the UN Task Force on Legal Identity. You can see in this slide, we have two main areas of support, the technical assistance, as well as the operational support. Regarding the technical assistance, first, we are focused on the strengthening institutional coordination, especially because in Mozambique, like in many countries, there are many institutions that are working directly in the area of legal identity. And what happened is that there are internally even a competition among the different stakeholders who are working in the area of legal identity. So it's very important to support the strengthening of the institutional coordination among ministries, institutions, even the election Commission, etc. Also, our UNLEA implementation plan is trying to support the strengthening the procurement, operation, monitoring and evaluation, and program management and reporting on the area of legal identity, the support of an implementation of the CRBS strategic plan. CRBS strategic plan, there's a plan has been developed by the government of Mozambique, and when they are, with the support of the UN, we are trying to coordinate all the activities on the legal identity. build operational capacity with the Ministry of Justice and Ministry of Interior. Those are the main ministries that are working in the legal identity, and also improve the community outreach in the area of legal identity. That part is the one that is referring to the technical assistance. But we have the operational support, and regarding the operational support, our UN LIA implementation plan is also consider the expansion of the ECRDS coverage to vital statistics, interoperability, data access and processing, concretely with the National Institute for Statistics. Also, the displaced person identity, and as you know, that's one of the major problems that we have in the country, with around 1 million of internal displaced people from the northern provinces that are being suffering for political problems in the north part. And also in the operation, there is we are working on the civil registration and mobile campaigns. Civil registration and voters registration. I want to mention, it's important for us here in Mozambique. Tomorrow, 20th of April, is started the voters registration campaign. It started from scratch, from zero, with the idea to register all the citizens from 18 years and above, and they will provide the voter's ID card for in this process. This is starting tomorrow in Mozambique. And finally, we have the digitalization of the historical records. This is a very important point, that we have something in Mozambique that really need to be taken into account. As you know, we have been suffering recently from every year very strong cyclones has been affected the country and has been destroying some of the offices that has all the deposit of the historic records. Then this is the area that we we want to support. Next, please. The UN agencies that are being working in this UN implementation plan concretely is UNICEF, UNDP, UNHCR, UNFPA, IOM, and WHO. Each area has a very specific area where we are working. Also, there's another agencies that are also working, that is UN Women and UNESCO. But these agencies that we mentioned here are the ones who were directly involved in the development of the UNLIA implementation plan in Mozambique. And finally, we want to mention that there are some important key issues for consideration, because Mozambique is making strides to ensure universal coverage of birth and death registration. However, there's an urgent need to integrate the civil registration, vital statistics, and identity management system at national level. As I mentioned, tomorrow we are starting the voter registration. This voter registration is not integrated yet, and it's one of the areas that we've been trying to promote this integration. LIA, the legal identity, is a priority at the highest level, even by the President of the Republic, Jacinto Nyusi, has been also launching the initiative ensuring the identity for all. And also the UNLIA is the flagship for the UNSDCF SP4, the strategic priority for the country that is regarding peace and governance and human rights. We are putting as a strategic priority for the country, for the UN country, the UNLIA and the integration. Our next steps and opportunities is going to be to operationalize this UNLIA implementation plan, especially under the leadership of the UN country team and the SP4 that I mentioned, always in cooperation with the World Bank, and also to chart out the roadmap for the integration between the CRDS and ID management. Thank you very much. Thank you. Obrigado. Kanimambo.
Thank you so much, Andres and Veronica. It's really nice to know that one UN, messaging, it was one UN coordination led to the strong message from the UN to other partners, including governments and external development partners like World Bank, to promote alignment of their work to the UN legal identity agenda, which is really encouraging. And with that, I'd like to move to Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is the country which I was really fascinated when I first heard about this case study from Elnur. It's actually a bit old project, but the case is still very much relevant given it highlights the importance of interoperability between civil registry and ID management. And that's why I specifically asked Elnur to do a presentation for this session. So Elnur, floor is yours.
Thank you, Risa. Hello, colleagues. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Elnur Khalilov. I'm the program analyst at the UNDP Country Office, Azerbaijan. So we had a project, we signed the project with the Minister of Justice in 2006, back to 2006, and the project lasted 6 years, and we have completed in 2012, 11 years ago. So main goal of the project was to establish a single, reliable, and using the latest and modern information communication technologies, the reliable source of population of the Azerbaijan. Why? Because since, as you well know, since gaining the independence in 1991, after collapse of the USSR, Azerbaijan inherited the old-fashioned style of the registration civil status acts. Number of the government entities, ministries, state committees, who provide the services to the population started to develop their own database on the population. And then, that was a bit of chaos. And it was the old times, it was on the paper base, some of them moved to the Excel type. And then by the decree of the president, the main two sources of the population database was within the Ministry of Interior and within the Ministry of Justice. So as you well know, Ministry of Justice was and currently is issuing the birth certificate, death certificate, marriage certificate, divorce certificate. So, and the Ministry of Internal Affairs is issuing the ID number, local ID number with a special unique number, and issuing the base with on that ID number, the passports. So we had two databases in the system. They were not linked to each other. I just, when I spoke to Risa a few months ago and I brought the sample of Azerbaijan, that was a bit, and I brought the sample of real myself. So that was the real house in the two systems. Like when I reached my age 27 and got married, in the system of the Minister of Justice, I become the married, but in the system of the Minister of Internal Affairs, who issues the local ID cards, I was still single, and I had to reach the age 35 when I'm eligible to change my ID card. And only 7 years, 8 years later, I was in the system like married. So then the lessons learned was the main lessons learned was that the no government entities wanted to unite to merge their databases, to give an access to the databases. And then we needed a strong political will. So finally, there was a presidential decree on establishment the unified, reliable, one source of population of Azerbaijan. And that was given to the Minister of Justice, but in the way that the Minister of Justice, of course, that it was UNDP, will create the special database, special software, which in one parallel time will be receiving the information from Minister of Justice and from Minister of Internal Affairs, and in the live regime will be creating, establishing the database on the population. So we started with the Minister of Justice. We had a very, very old paper-based, old-fashioned books, which almost unreadable. And we managed to unwrap all these books with both special equipment to unwrap all these books, special scanners to scan all these books, civil status acts. Around 7.1 million civil status acts starting in 1925 was scanned, were transferred from JPEG format to the special format, like a Word type format, readable. And then 120 people were sitting in front of the computer comparing the origin with the scanned version, which moved to the Word format. So we were able to digitalize the whole Ministry of Justice information system into the electronic, which is the main source when you want to establish the unified reliable civil registry, because you need to have a date, and data must be the electronic and digital. So with the minister, and then we procured a special software, we procured a special hardware. We established a special room where in online regime, the Minister of Internal Affairs data comes to the data center, and in online regime, the data which comes from the Minister of Justice comes to that room, which we will call the data center, and that data center created the only reliable source on population, which consisted of 18 parameters for each an individual person of the country, citizen, and there was a special unique number, which is given during the birth time and goes with the person when the person dies. That the special unique number never repeats. The main goal and main achievement of the project was, first of all, finally in the country, we have one reliable and absolutely accurate and precise civil registry system in the country. And we have number of the government entities who provide the services to the population. And by the decree of the president, they only enter to that system. So no more own systems, no more own databases on population is allowed within each and every government institution, because the State Social Pension Fund had his own database, Minister of Internal Affairs had its own database, Minister of Justice, and so on. So during the establishment of the one-stop shop principle ASAN service centers in the country, so each and every government institutions who are providing the services to the populations were giving the access to the civil register system of Azerbaijan. But if the Minister of Internal Affairs is providing the services to Elnur Khalilov, the minister has only limited access. They don't see, for example, if they don't need to know who is my daughter, who is my wife, who is my son, and who is my father, if they are not eligible to know that, they don't have access to that parameters of the information which consists about Elnur Khalilov. The same goes for the military services, the same goes for the banking services. So each and every government institution has an access, special access, and using that databases. In parallel, 200 kilometers from the Baku, we have laid down the special armed fiber optic cable, and we built the backup service center. So where there is always in the online regime, the backup service centers, it's it's a -3 floor, it's fully protected, it's a concrete, so no one can bomb it or steal the information. It's always the highly protected the area within the Ministry of Justice and within the backup centers. I would say that the project was extremely successful. President itself came to inauguration, red ribbon cutting ceremony of the inauguration of the project itself, its building, and he was extremely happy that finally, so during the, for example, election times, during the issuing the ID cards, the government institutions will be using the one reliable source of the population. For example, during the elections, they need to have information about the citizens who are eligible to vote, because you have to reach certain age in the country as per constitution to be eligible for the voting. And then they are printing the list of the people who lives in the area, for example, area A, and they don't know the person already passed away. His in the country, did he migrated or not. So therefore, now the State Election Committee requests the civil registry via online regime, get the precise information about the eligible people who can come to the district A and B and vote. So at those times was for example, I was going for the parliamentary elections for the voting, and I saw my grandfather, who passed away 5 years ago, is in the list. So that was the total mess, and now you won't find this situation. It's absolutely transparent, it's absolutely precise. So each and every accurate information on the citizens in online regime is available for the government institutions. I would say that the lessons learned, it was the reluctancy of the government institutions to provide the information required at the certain age of the implementation of the project, and only the political will of the senior management of the country helped a lot to introduce the reliable source of the population, civil registry. And from the 2012, when the project completed, and by the decree of the president, from now on, everyone uses that reliable source of the population. Each and every government institution uses only one source of the population, so-called the civil registry of the Azerbaijan. I don't want to go into the details. Frankly speaking, it wasn't easy, because the whole information which we needed, it was a very old-fashioned, very paper-based, and that took a lot of time to move the almost 75 years of the population information about the population, which was civil status acts, into the digital format. That was the very difficult part. To develop the software, to procure the hardware, you don't need to complete the Harvard University. That's not very difficult, frankly speaking. So that was the difficult part of the implementation of the project. It was fully funded by the government. Of course, there was a contribution of UNDP, but that was one of the successful projects implemented in our country office. I'm open to questions, and my email is available, ready to provide information. Sorry, I don't have a presentation because the project was completed 11 years ago, but I still have institutional memory, and of course, they have some documents with me.
Thank you so much for the amazing presentation. I think you highlighted the important point that the integrated database and unique identification number contributes to the better service delivery. And also, it was really important that access to information and then data protection are considered in the design and implementation of the CRVS and national ID system. So thank you so much, Elnur. So now,
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So now, lastly, I'd like to introduce Honduras case. In Honduras, there is a big national ID project supported by UNDP, and the interoperability of CRVS, national ID, and other functional registry moved the country to better service delivery and also political socio-economic inclusion. And it has a good collaboration with a regional development bank, World Bank, and other external partners. So Alessandra shall present her experience now. So over to you, Ale.
Thank you, Risa. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here today with you to share our experience in Honduras. First of all, let me introduce, I'm Alessandra Rossi, Chief Technical Advisor of the Citizens Identification Program in Honduras. So I would like to share the work of UNDP in UN LEA implementation plan and legal identity. We have a program called Support for the Efficiency and Transparency of the Process of Modernization of the National Identification Document in Honduras, NEXT. This project work to broader support the national institution in charge of registration in strengthening national identification as an enabler to the improvement of the access of citizens to a variety of public and private services. A little bit of project background. The 2017 national election resulted in a political crisis never seen before in Honduras. One of the main issues highlighted was the flawed electoral census. The situation brought to the light the need to update the data of citizen registries, which had not been done for more than 30 years in Honduras. In collaboration with the Central American Bank of Economic Integration, CABEI, UNDP are supporting a very successful civil registry project in Honduras, which has been funded by the bank through a loan for an amount of almost $100 million. With the support of the UNDP and Identificate, the newly reconstituted National Registration Bureau, RNP, Registro Nacional de las Personas, registered 5.5 million people and issued 4.9 million new ID cards in record time. Next, which have been recognized as the most secure identity card in Latin America last year. The support of UNDP to the work of RNP leading towards the purification of the electoral roster ahead of a highly contested, as I said, 2017 election, as also prized by International Electoral Observation Mission as a significant contribution to ensure peaceful and electoral process. This show as functional registry, such a voter registry, can benefit from one single source of truth. The new civil registries, in fact, contributed of the national identification process to the democracy and governance of country. In fact, first fingerprint registry was made available to the electoral body to activate fingerprints readers in election and the polling station. So next, as I said, this operation was made in record time with the support of the UNDP that was in charge of the enrollment of citizens and distribution card, design of the software, procurement of material, and you can see how the operation look like. And I would like to announce not only the record time that it was made, but also despite the political crisis, the COVID context, and also through terrible tropical storms. The main achievement, of course, are related to the fact that UNDP, the card were made available to the majority of the population. As I mentioned, 5.5 million people were registered in a biometric database, and 4.9 million of new ID cards were made available to the citizens prior election, which was like a milestone for us. And it's very important to underline that sector of population that were regularly excluded by the registration system where they become visible, as for example indigenous people. You can see that indigenous people, 500,000 of indigenous people got their ID card for first time in the history of Honduras. Also, is very important the underline the inclusion of transsexual people through the authorization to change name, the last mention that the new ID card was recognized as the best identity of the Latin American region by ensuring high security through technology and future printing future. Next. So the project definitely align with the UN-LIA and of course comply with the Sustainable Development Goals. So which are like 69, provide legal access and birth registration, 78, creation of digital banks, enabling the exchange of information between different public and private institutions in the country. And finally, 5B, announced the use of enabling technology, in particular information and communication technology, to promote the empowerment of women. So Project Go also achieved, as I mentioned, to the creation of an updated citizens database through a massive digital biometric registration, of course, distribution of a new ID card, which high level of security. It's very important to highlight now the importance of the integration, interoperability among civil registry and national ID. At this stage, the data are shared with public and private institutions. National Registration Bureau has signed almost 100 memorandum of understanding with public and private institutions in order to share data and interoperate, for example, with bank, police, Ministry of Education, and migration. At this stage, we are supporting as UNDP, in collaboration with World Bank and European Union, a new law which aims to modernize the registration system, the institution for, itself, but also to protect data and to establish mechanism of the interoperability. The update data will help generating such social programs and policies from different sectors of the population, as vital statistics were updated for targeting group. For example, we created the first indigenous population census, the first person with disability census. So with the data, we can elaborate, the state can elaborate social programs for targeted group. The new system finally will lead to better public services, delivering service delivery and financial inclusion, as I mentioned, for last sectors. And having completing this first phase of the registration, focusing mainly in registration of adults, the UNDP will continue its work expanding toward registration of young people and minors, and with introduction of the new digital ID. We are preparing this new phase with continuous support of World Bank, and we hope to launch this program for identification of minors in the upcoming months. And this project will aim to enhance social protection and social programs for youth and marginalized sector of the population. So thank you very much for the opportunity. If you have any question, don't hesitate. Over to you, Risa.
Thank you so much, Ale, and then all other colleagues who made wonderful presentations. So with that, I'd like to conclude this webinar. Thank you again so much for participating, and looking forward to seeing you next month. Thank you.